for coming in today. We are very pleased to have you here, and we're also, of course, even more pleased to have our distinguished speaker today, Professor Achcar. I'm Katarzyna Syslik, and I'm the convener of the lecture series. And today's lecture is doubly special. Not only do we have a distinguished speaker, we also have this lecture organized by our Students for Palestine group, who have been extremely active in organizing events, awareness raising, campaigning, and all kinds of activities, which we very much admire and are proud of. So the session will take around 45 minutes to an hour of lecturing, and then we're going to have time for discussion, unless you would like the audience to be interrupting you with questions as you speak.
I think it's safer to do
it. Okay, so we have about an hour and a half for the session, and I'm just going to ask Mahtab to introduce the speaker.
Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you. I think we have some more. Okay. Thank you so much for making time and joining us for this lecture. So my name is Mahtab Uddin. I'm a PhD student at the GDI, and I'm also the chair of the GDI Students for Palestine. We're a student group. We're registered with the Students' Union at the University of Manchester. We arrange lectures, seminars, and recently we organized a conference on the October 17th on Palestine and social justice. It's our honor to have Professor Gilbert with us for this lecture today. Professor Gilbert is a professor of development studies and international relations at SOAS, University of London. He has degrees in philosophy, social sciences, and a PhD in social history, international relations. Before joining SOAS in 2007, he taught and researched in various universities and research centers in Beirut, Berlin, and Paris. Professor Gilbert has many books published in a total of 20 languages, so we are very proud to have you here. And after this book talk, he has a book launching event, book talk. After this lecture, he has a book talk in the Blackwells at 7 p.m. So, Professor Gilbert, the floor is yours. Thank you so much.
Thank you for the invitation, the opportunity to meet you. Well, I think it's also a reflection of the events. 15 years ago, we would have had a meeting on this topic. The room would have been full, and people lost interest in what is happening in the region. At the same time, of course, the attention shifted from that to the genocide that has been going on for the last couple of years in Gaza. So fortunately, there is after this one, there is a 7 in the bookshop here, an opportunity to speak of Gaza and of Palestine. Of course, now my topic, I'll stick to the announced topic, which is the title that is here and the one that you saw in the announcement. Right. And well, the question is how to assess this succession of events that the Middle East and North Africa, that is the Arab-speaking region, has gone through over those last 15 years. And if you think of it, this is a very exceptional sequence of events. In 2011, what was called the Arab Spring, you had a real revolutionary shockwave that shook the whole region. Practically not, with the exception of very artificial states like the United Arab Emirates and Qatar, where those having the local citizenship are 10% of the population and 90% of expats or migrants. With the exception of these, not a single country was not affected by the revolutionary shockwave, at the very least in the form of the rise of political and social protest. But 6 countries of the region, 6 in the same year, went into uprising mode, into major uprisings. Started in Tunisia, shifted to Egypt, then Libya, Yemen, Bahrain, and Syria. So six of the region's countries. And that was a first wave, which was actually defeated basically within a couple of years. That is, by 2013, it was basically defeated after 2013. Then in 2019, you had a second wave, and this time 4 countries had uprisings: Sudan, Algeria, Iraq, and Lebanon. So you have a total of 10 countries. That is almost half the countries of this geopolitical area called Middle East and North Africa, and more than half the populations. So that's absolutely amazing. You just think of the same at the level of Europe. You have to go back maybe to the aftermath of the First World War to see that kind of revolutionary shockwave spreading over a whole region. So the question is why, of course, you have this. It can't be a political, of course, uprisings are political events, but the underlying cause of all that can't be political, because you have very different political conditions between the countries that I mentioned. So it's not a matter of political explanation. There must be something else. And here, well, at least here I'm speaking to those who are in development studies among you.
Sorry.
Yeah, that's much better. Thank you. Thank you. Right. Oh, no. What happened?
If you just move the mouse there.
Yeah. Okay. So, as someone in political economy or development studies or whatever, the normal reaction to such events would be to investigate the root causes in social economic factors that affect the region, and if there are any common factors, because what you're doing it's a matter of Sherlock Holmes kind of logic. You're trying to find a common denominator, a common factor between all these countries that might explain those uprisings, those chains of uprising. And indeed, if we consider that as part of the global South, although some of the countries, those I mentioned, United Arab Emirates or Qatar, are among the rich countries, or they are countries with absolutely a huge inequality between bunch of very rich people and 10% of citizenry who are privileged, and then migrants or expats. Even the terms used differ depending on the kind of salary and condition they have. But if we look at the rest, countries like Egypt, Syria, Morocco, and the rest, of course, they are very classically countries of the global South, having those features of the global south, and that's the case of the majority of the countries, therefore, in the region. And so, I mean, what you could examine is a triptych of as I call it, of poverty, inequality, and precarity. And if we look at these three conditions, starting with poverty, well, you can see here that the Middle East and North Africa is this green section. So what strikes you is the reduction, the massive reduction of the number of people living in extreme poverty in South Asia and East Asia. Well, that's China and India, where you had this. That's of course, but since the uprisings started in 2011, if you look at it here at this level, you see that this Middle East and North Africa, I mean, this is Sub-Saharan Africa, the blue one. You see that Middle East and North Africa is not characterized by great poverty compared to South Asia or Sub-Saharan Africa in particular, or even to what East Asia was. But what is striking, if you look at that, is the fact that it's stagnating. You see that this level of poverty doesn't change practically. It's the same from 1990 to 2025. And there you have a major clue to which we will be getting back. Quickly about the other things, inequality, there are no reliable figures about inequality in the region. There are some official statistics, but they are unreliable in the sense that they are made, or when they are a little bit scientific, they follow models that do not reflect the real range of social problems, and especially inequality. I mean, income is not something that you can, there are no real figures on income in the region. But of course, it is obvious to any observer, and in general figures, that this is one of the most unequal regions in the world, probably the most, if we take it as a region, the most unequal, as you could see from these figures in red, and that indeed, as it is said here, perceptions of this inequality, most probably, or even one could even say certainly, played a role in the frustration that exists in the region. Now, precarity, about precariousness. Here you see, again, like for poverty, this is not the most precarious part of the world. I mean, Sub-Saharan Africa or South Asia have higher rates of informal employment. So, although of course you have it in the Middle East and North Africa, but there are parts of the world where this is worse. So that's not, again, the single factor that we could see as really characterizing the region and the region as a whole, and explaining this singularity of such waves of uprising. Now, if we look at unemployment, then we find something that is very striking, is the fact that this is a part of the world with the highest rates of youth unemployment. And it's been like this. Here you have it over practically since the start, the turn of this century. But actually, it's been going on like this for several decades. If you see, this is starting in 95. You see where the Middle East and North Africa are starting way above the rest of the regions of the world. Now, for those who are not familiar with these issues, unemployment is measured on the basis of people who are seeking a job, who declare that they are seeking a job, and that explain why in poorest societies, it might be paradoxical, but it's not. You may have higher unemployment. You may have lesser unemployment than in richer societies, because in order to be unemployed, you first of all you need to afford to be unemployed, in the sense that have some conditions that allow you to be seeking a job and waiting to find a job in order to work. And that explains for sure why this youth unemployment in particular can be much higher in North Africa and the Middle East than it is in sub-Saharan Africa or South Asia for that matter. So it is a reflection of what we saw at the beginning, the poverty thing. That is, this is a region which is better off than those other regions. But yet, the fact that you have such a huge youth unemployment is, of course, a source of very deep frustration. And a more specific source than the issue of inequality. And here we touch upon a major factor in that regard. And when we look we take a closer look at this unemployment, we see that it is disproportionately an unemployment of graduates. And as this ILO, International Labour Organization report put it quite well, educational attainment actually increases the risk of joblessness. Well, no, I said it, I put it quite well. Actually, if we think of it, it's not educational attainment that increases the risk, but educational attainment indicates that you are in a social position where you would want some type of work or some level of work, short of which you will keep looking for a work. You won't take anything. That's the difference between very poor societies. As I said, you have to, afford to be unemployed and not be obliged to go sell bottles of water or tissues at traffic lights, for instance, or in trains or whatever, as you have in so many countries, including in these countries. But the proportions are different. So these factors combined, especially this youth unemployment, and within this youth unemployment, the graduate youth unemployment, these are key factors in explaining the explosion, especially that young people, of course, when you say uprising, you're not speaking of people of my generation or no longer. You're speaking of young people, and that's what most of those who are mobilizing those uprising are. And so that's definitely is a major clue to what happened. And the translation is in that. This is just before 2011. And you can see where the youth are most frustrated. The first country that comes here in this is Tunisia, where all started. You had 44% of young people saying they want to leave the country. They find it hopeless. They believe that they should go to Morocco, Algeria, I mean, Egypt 20%, which is a very high proportion anyway, but it's a much bigger country, of course, than Tunisia, and with a much bigger rural population. So, but still, you have quite high proportions, and if you see what happened with that over those 15 years, you see that it's just increasing. So now, I mean, if you put aside those Gulf countries, where those who are migrants there don't want to migrate, and the locals have no incentive to migrate because they have a lot of privileges, the nationals. But if you take North Africa and the Middle East, you see that you have close to 50% of the young people saying they want to leave, they want to immigrate. So this is a huge level of frustration. And this huge level of frustration is the key, and which has accumulated, as I said and as I showed you, over decades before 2011, is what exploded in 2011 and is still exploding, as we shall see. There is also a gender dimension to this unemployment and to general condition of women in the region, with a very low rate of of participation in the labor force. It is the lowest in the world, and the highest disparity, I mean, the highest rate of female unemployment compared to male unemployment. So on both levels, women in the region are very much disadvantaged, and when they can express themselves, they will be very much part of those. I mean, all the uprisings of 2011, 2019 had, as long as they were non-violent. When it turns violent, things change completely, but when they were mass uprisings, they were characterized by a significant participation of women, including in a country where the condition of women is seclusion, generally, like Yemen. Okay, so now and here, if we think of this high rate of female unemployment, keeping in mind what I said about unemployment, we have again a clue to the cause of all this, and it is in the fact that what here is called a slowdown in the growth of public sector employment. The fact that you've had this global push towards shrinking the public sector to the benefit of the private sector, and that happens globally with what is called neoliberalism since the 90s, in particular, when it accelerated at the global level. This had direct effect on female unemployment in diminishing the job outlets that were attractive to women, where you had what are called the reservation conditions. That is, certain conditions. I mean, those sectors where women find it okay to work. I mean, there are some sectors where you have, for cultural reasons, where women wouldn't go. So usually sectors which are public sectors, large public sectors, or health and education, and things, are where women would go, and the shrinking of employment at the general level of also the administration is what explain this decline and rise, therefore, of female decline in jobs and rise in female unemployment. And we'll see how all these issues are connected finally with the clues that we found. Because if you have unemployment, if you carry on trying to find a la Sherlock Holmes, unemployment means that your economy is not producing jobs. That means there is a problem of even of growth in the very basic sense of the term, and that's what you would examine next to the unemployment. And if we take a look at the decades that preceded the explosion of 2011, we see indeed that the Middle East and North Africa here in the middle, I mean, in terms of annual growth rate of the GDP, the gross domestic product per capita, that therefore takes into account the demography, had been, even in the 70s and 80s, has been negative. That is, the demography was faster than the economic growth. And then in the next 2 decades, it was at half the rate, the average rate of developing countries, exactly the half, and way below East Asia, of course, China in particular, but also other East Asian countries, which with a much faster development than the Middle East and North Africa, and even South Asia. So there is a problem of growth, and that is what translated in unemployment. Now, if we try to see if maybe that's just a matter of demography, and we look at this factor, we see that in the 70s and 80s it was higher. I mean, the population growth rate in the Middle East and North Africa was the highest of all regions of the world. But I mean, you can see here that it's not substantially higher than that of sub-Saharan Africa. And then in the next 2 decades, before the explosion of 2011, it went actually down, and quite sharply. It was lower than sub-Saharan Africa and practically close to South Asia. So that does not explain this. There is a clear disparity. So the problem here is not demography, the problem is something else. And what is the something else? Again here, carry on. If you don't have growth and all that, then the next factor you will examine is investment, right? This is confirmed by the general pattern of this growth now until more recently. You can see that the Middle East and North Africa, which is in blue, has had quite lower rates of growth up to now. I mean, even with a widening gap after the 2011 period with South Asia and East Asia. So that factor, that specific low rate of growth has continued. It's been there for a long time. This is starting from 1990. So, investment. Here, as a percentage of GDP, well, you have it here. You see that the rate of investment in the Middle East and North Africa is way below those of South Asia and East Asia, right? And therefore, that's the reason why the region is lagging behind in terms of rates of growth. There is no mystery here. It's clear. Lesser rate of investment and therefore lesser rate of growth. And at the time, this basic research I did is to be found in a book I wrote right after the Arab Spring, as it was called, and it came out 2013. The title is "The People Want," a radical exploration of the Arab uprising. It came out in a second edition 3 years ago, 2022. So the basic analysis is there, but these are some more recent figures, just confirming what could be what was said from the beginning about all this. But at the time of the book, I tried to find figures, comparative figures, where I could compare with other with East Asia and South Asia. And for the years before, and the period for which I had figures was the period 95 to 2007, because I wanted to examine the next question. We found it's a matter of investment. Then the next question is it public investment or private investment that is different? And here we see that in terms of public, without the GCC, where the economic conditions of the countries are quite different, the Gulf cooperation countries, but you see that public sector, what is striking is first that East Asia has, of course, a much higher rate of public investment than other parts of the world. And that's actually belies the neoliberal myth of the fact that the private sector is the key to everything. Actually, China, of course, and other East Asian countries have had a lot of state intervention in the economy, which is the key factor for the speed of their economic development. The Middle East and North Africa is here, and it is quite low compared to other. Now you could say, and you would see here, that South Asia has even less. But if we look at the private sector, you see that South Asia had a private sector. It's closer to the neoliberal perspective. India, for instance, is that case, because here the private sector has been the dominant in the in investment. Now, what you see here is East Asia went up here. These are years of crisis. That's why you had this. You had this big financial crisis in East Asia. That's why it went down. But otherwise, it is. Also more than in the Middle East and North Africa. So the problem here is the Middle East and North Africa, where you have low public investment and low private investment. Private investment that hasn't compensated for public investment, and so that points to a basic problem with the neoliberal perspective, which was shrink the state, shrink the public sector, privatize, let the private sector be the driving engine of the economy, and you will see miracles. They didn't happen. They didn't happen, and we'll get now to the reason for that. And this reason is rooted in the specific type of economies and states that you have in the region, this peculiar capitalism of the region. There are a number of features that are characteristic of the region. First of all, the fact that this is a region with probably the highest density in the world of frontier states, that is, states that of which a significant part of the income comes from either natural resources or even strategic locations, and therefore being paid for that, or whatever activities that are not a direct product of labor. So you have a high proportion of frontier states. Of course, the most obvious one is everything linked to the fossil fuels, to hydrocarbons, oil and gas, and the rest. But as I said, you have strategic, like a country like Jordan or Egypt, for instance, are subsidized by the global system, by the United States, by local Gulf countries for their strategic role, for their military role, and so that's part of it. You have other also natural resources, but as a whole, the key point is this high concentration, especially of plainly frontier states in hydrocarbons, Algeria, Libya, the Gulf countries. Even Syria has some. Iraq, of course, is a major producer. So you have it all over the region. Egypt exports gas. So you have a lot. Plus the Suez Canal. That's another source of rent. So that's one feature. The second feature is that this is a region which is also characterized by a number of patrimonial states. What does it mean? That is a reference to states which are unlike the modern state, where you have separation between the state institutions and the rulers. The rulers are there, between two elections or whatever. They don't own the state. Patrimonial states are more like absolutist states of the past, where you have a ruling group, a ruling family that owns the state, that regard the state as its private ownership. Generally speaking, about the global south, the category that is used is neo-patrimonial. That is those states where you have some degree of separation. You have elections and change of personnel that might happen, but you have very high nepotism and cronism. And these are called, in the jargon of political science, neo-patrimonial state. Now, of course, the region, the Middle East and North Africa, is one where you have neo-patrimonial state, but what is specific is that you have what is worse than the patrimonial state. You have fully patrimonial states, and these are the monarchies. You have 8 of them, which are quite traditional monarchies, where the ruling family owns, regard the state as its private ownership. And you even had so-called republics where this happened. with ruling families in the same. The Assad family in Syria, had Saddam Hussein not been overthrown by the United States in 2003, one of his sons would have inherited power from him, and the same goes for Gaddafi. So Libya, Iraq, Syria are also similar to those monarchies, patrimonial state. And this hardcore of fully patrimonial states affects the rest and makes the whole region very much determined by two factors, and this is what is peculiar. What is specific to the capitalism of the region. It is a politically determined capitalism. It is determined by relation to power, to political power. It's not the market that rules, if you want. It's the connection. And so cronism, nepotism, and the rest are very widespread. It is also a politically determined capitalism in the sense that the region is one of the most unstable parts of the world in terms of security and wars, and therefore a very high degree of unpredictability. Also unpredictability of the behavior of the rulers, if you're not part of them. Okay? If you develop a business which is thriving, then you will expect the ruling family to knock on your door and say, we want a share, if not worse. So these are practices that are common. So under such conditions, to believe that you just need to shrink the public sector and open it to the private sector and it will be marvelous is just illogical. And that's the matter with the international financial institutions. They are really dogmatic. You had a famous joke about the IMF, calling it the international monetarist fundamentalism. It is actually, in some sense, it is fundamentalist in the sense that it is dogmatic, disregarding the peculiar conditions of states. So you have this dogma about the private sector and the rest, which is forced on all countries of the world, regardless of their specific conditions. Now, it might work, it may work in some countries which have some kind of dynamic sector of small and medium enterprises which are open to export and the rest. There are some countries that fit the description. But other parts of the world, and especially this one we are discussing, do not, and that is the reason why ever since those changes started being implemented they started early on with the dismantlement of the so-called socialist period that preceded in the 1960s. So from the 70s you had a beginning of dismantlement of those public sectors that accelerated in the 90s, and the result has been this rise of unemployment because of everything that we explained, and therefore leading to the explosion of the region. This is confirmed, if you want, by even this is an enterprise survey done by the World Bank and other institutions, just confirming what I've been saying. So actually, that's more recent than the book I wrote about that, but it confirms that political instability, high perceived levels of corruption, political connections. This is what most of the people in the business sector who don't have these connections complain of, and that's how they explain what the problem is in their view. As you can see, that also, where does money go in such perspective. As I explained here, you would have the private capitalism will look for quick profit, would go for real estate, also speculation, trade, light investment, and that's what you get now. Is a recent report by the OECD showing what is the logical conclusion that was mentioned before, that you see that foreign investment, and that gives you an indication of local investment also, goes to extractive industries, real estate and construction, as well as light manufacturing. And these are sectors that with low job creation, and there is far less investment in the kind of industries that such countries would need to have a vigorous economy and a much lesser rate of unemployment. Now, a few words about the uprising. Well, the explosion started in Tunisia, which is not a coincidence we saw because of the high rate of frustration of the youth in that country. But it has another factor that explains why it was the first country in the region where a mass movement managed to overthrow a dictator, a despot, a leader. And that was because of something specific to Tunisia, is the only relatively powerful autonomous labor movement or semi-autonomous labor movement in the region. This was a particularity of Tunisia. They had a strong labor confederation, which played a key role in organizing the uprising once it had started. Now we find the labor movement playing roles in other countries, in Bahrain, where you had also an important labor movement history, even in Yemen. But we can't say it's generalized, and that's also why, for instance, in Tunisia, you had a victory of the movement. In other countries, you had defeats early on. Another factor is the role of Islamic fundamentalist movements. You had the development over the years in this part of the world of Islamic fundamentalist movement, the most important of which is the Muslim Brotherhood, which has branches in all the countries of the region, and which has been in most cases in the opposition, often a loyal opposition and moderate opposition, but they seized the opportunity of the uprisings, and that's another factor. When you don't have labor movement, you would have them, or you could have both, like in Tunisia, and they managed to bring the uprising to fruition in the sense of overthrowing the existing regime. Now, the dynamics of all that have been quite different according to the nature of the state. In fully patrimonial states, it is just or almost impossible, let's say, to think of a peaceful overthrow of the ruler, because precisely they regard the state, especially the armed forces and the elite forces of the armed forces, as their Praetorian Guard, which is linked to them organically through various means, and therefore you will need to smash this guard of the regime in order to overthrow the regime. And that's why in such states it turns quickly into civil war. Now the only monarchy in 2019 where you had a major uprising was Bahrain, but the uprising was subdued by the intervention of the Gulf countries led by the Saudi Kingdom, which is neighbor of Bahrain. In Libya and in Syria, where you had major uprisings and you had a patrimonial state, it turned into a civil war. Whereas if you take Egypt, where you have a neo-patrimonial state, some degree of separation between the ruling family and the institution, and there the most important state institution, the one that is ruling, is the armed forces. Well, the armed forces got rid of Mubarak, of the president. So that's what you can't have in a fully patrimonial state, because the armed forces would be organically linked to the ruling family, which is not the case in a country like Egypt or wasn't the case also in Tunisia, and that's the two countries where they managed to get rid of the ruler, followed also by Yemen, which has a more complex kind of situation. So these are differences that explain the different dynamics of all that. As I said at the beginning, you had two big waves, 2011, 2019. There has been a learning curve, shifting from one to the other, and the most important thing that people learned was not to repeat the illusions that the mass movement had about the army in Egypt in 2011. So in both Algeria and Sudan, which are the two other countries of the region where the army is ruling, the mass movement, even though you had the same scenario, the military removing the president, the mass movement had no illusions about the military, unlike what happened in Egypt 2011. So there is a learning curve here. Another major difference is that the Islamic fundamentalists who hijacked, one could say, the movement in 2011, were actually this time not in the opposition but on the other side in 2019 in the four countries that Sudan, Algeria, Lebanon, and Iraq. Actually, Islamic fundamentalist forces were in power or allied with power, and therefore you didn't have, their role was very different than in 2011. And that explains also the fact that you had also a more visible role of women. Now, the issue of organization, like you had in 2011, you had a wide use of social media, Facebook, Twitter, and the rest, and that's what compensated for the lack of physical networks able to lead, except for the Islamic fundamentalists, but the rest, the secular, let's say, forces were much weaker. They had been weakened by years of repression, and the exception here was Sudan, and it's been Sudan, where you had a really unique combination of some important labor mobilization and a youth movement, which is very exceptional, which has taken the form of a kind of horizontal network of youth groups, which mobilized tens of thousands, if not more. There is no specific figure, but it was a very big movement, and they played the role of the spearhead of the uprising in that country, and that was the most promising development there. But then this wave of 2019 faced the COVID pandemic, which played a role in ending the movement in the three countries other than Sudan. And in Sudan, thanks to the role of the youth movement, the movement carried on. But finally, what you have had is that you had a coup trying to stop to end this momentum created by the 2019 uprising. This coup was fought by those young people of the resistance committees, as they were called. But 2 years later, it's the military among themselves that started fighting, and since then Sudan, as you have certainly heard, is going through a nightmare, another one in the region, with the most acute humanitarian crisis in today's world, and absolutely terrible civil war. The last country that had maintained gains from 2011, and they were democratic gains, which was Tunisia, has lost them in 2021. So defeat is general now. But when we get back to what we found from the beginning, which is the deep-rooted structural causes of this frustration, discontent, and explosions, then when we see that nothing of that has been solved, but on the contrary, it has just worsened, then we understand that we are in what I called from the start a long-term revolutionary process. That's something that I insisted upon from the beginning, from 2011, when people were thinking of spring. Even the term spring was something like short-term change that will quickly end and be successful. I insisted on the fact that we entered a long-term revolutionary process. That means of ups and downs, revolution, counter-revolution, and the rest. The key point remains in that regard the organizational weakness. I mean, the lack of organization capable of expressing the aspirations of those who rise up, and especially the young people. This had been the key weakness, and yet, and this, just as a confirmation of the fact that we're not. I mean, this process is going on. Just a few weeks ago, you had a major uprising of the youth in Morocco, part of those Gen Z and Z generation movements that you've had in some countries, which are disconnected. There are no, but here in Morocco, you had one which was inspired by what was happening in Nepal and some other countries, so you had this large movement in Morocco, and when you look at the figures there, you find that the same problem, the same pattern that we mentioned: youth unemployment, very high rates, almost 36% for the young people, and with a rate reaching close to half in the urban areas, 47%. Close to half of the young people in the urban areas are unemployed. That is, people again who want a job, who are looking for a job, who are not finding one, and even for the next age group, you still have very high rate of unemployment, and you have a very high rate of graduate unemployment, and gender, also the gender dimension is there. So all the features that we discuss are there, and that explains why. And this process, is going on and will be going on as long as you don't have a major change in the region. You will have turmoil, you will have uprisings, you will have explosions, social explosions, and in the absence of positive outcomes, they may turn again and again into tragedies, into civil wars and the rest. But that's how history works. Thank you.